This episode of Simple Civics Greenville County is brought to you by Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, providing free books to children 0 to 5 throughout Greenville County. To sign up, visit greenvillefirststeps.org/freebooks. That's greenvillefirststeps.org/freebooks.
2026 is a big election year, and it will be one of the most consequential on record for South Carolina. Do you know who will be on your ballot? I'm Katie Smith with Greater Good Greenville, and on this episode of Simple Civics Greenville County, our producer Nathaniel DeSantis and I will walk you through an early preview of your must-do voting activities. We'll look at the key races from federal level down to our local Greenville County seats. Some of your votes will have national implications. We'll also clue you in on the critical election deadlines, including the all-important June primary and primary runoff dates, and why the competition in the spring filing period matters. So get ready to mark your calendar and get informed. We're here to help you get prepared for our next big election.
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Nathaniel here with Katie, talking about elections. 2026 is a big election, and we wanted to take a look at what voters like you will be deciding on.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this because it's really never too early to look ahead. And it is a big year, so let's do it.
For our listeners, we're talking about all of the statewide races, the federal races, and some of the local elections that Greenville voters like you will see. So let's start at the top on the federal level. What will we be voting for in November 2026?
Yeah, 2026 is a big midterm year. So every one of our 7 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives in our state will be up for election, including 2 that cover parts of Greenville County. That's District 3, represented by Sheri, and District 4, represented by William Timmons. And then most notably, there is a U.S. Senate seat on the ballot, and that's the one currently held by Senator Lindsey Graham. He has indicated his plans to run for a 5th term, so that race is not just one to watch here in South Carolina, but of course nationally.
And the Senate race, for those of you who don't know, that's always going to draw a lot of money and attention to that race. But moving down to the state level, what's happening in our favorite place, Columbia?
Things do get interesting for Greenville voters next year because in 2026, we are electing a governor and our other statewide constitutional officers, which we'll talk more about.
Our current governor, Henry McMaster, I believe is term limited, correct?
Yes, he cannot seek a 3rd term. So this means we have a wide open gubernatorial race. And we have already heard of a lot of high-profile Republicans who've announced their campaigns, including our current Attorney General, Alan Wilson, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, who is from Greenville County. Some of our U.S. House members have said they want to run or plan to run. And then on the Democratic side, Charleston Attorney Mullins McLeod has also announced. So it's already a crowded and competitive field, which means that primary in June is going to be crucial and everyone has a chance to vote in it.
Speaking of those other statewide offices, which ones are on the ballot besides governor?
All of the statewide constitutional offices. So that is our Attorney General, our Secretary of State, our Treasurer, Comptroller General, Superintendent of Education, and Commissioner of Agriculture. These are executive positions that manage really important state agencies, and so they have a direct impact on everyday life in South Carolina. I mean, just that Superintendent of Education role, they are responsible for our state's public schools, and many of you longer-time listeners and voters know that in that 2022 primary, it was heated. It was heated on both the Republican and Democratic side, with a runoff on both sides for those candidates to end up on the November ballot.
That is a massive slate of candidates to choose from. Let's talk about the state house, though.
Every one of our 124 seats in the South Carolina House of Representatives is up for election in 2026. So all of those House districts that fall within Greenville County will be on the ballot. And this is where really important legislative action happens, from budgets to infrastructure. So this is really important for our local interests.
124 seats, that is a lot. And I will plug our episode with John Michael Catalano, who talks about Election Day behind the scenes, because I can only imagine what that day will be like for that team. It's got to be stressful for that many seats.
Yeah, it's a lot for the Election Commission to manage, and they do a great job.
They do. So go listen to that episode. We'll put it in the show notes for you. I noticed, though, you did not mention the state Senate. Is that just not part of the 26 election cycle?
It is an important distinction for South Carolina voters. Our state Senate elections are off cycle in 2026. Their next election will be in 2028. They run every 4 years on those same presidential years. So the 2026 focus for the General Assembly is entirely on the State House. And as always, we will aim to bring candidate voices to you so you can get to meet them on the Simple Civics Greenville County podcast.
Got it. State House, but not State Senate. That's later. Now, we are a podcast for Greenville County, in case you didn't know that from the title. So let's shift our focus to the hyperlocal level. What local county level offices should our listeners be preparing to vote for?
So our even years always bring up about half of our county council and about half of our school board. Our county council is partisan, so you will have primaries and general elections for those seats. And then we also have constitutional officers for the county, like our probate judge, our auditor, our solicitor, and our Greenville County treasurer.
So those are the leaders who handle wills, land records, prosecution, and the county's money. They will all be elected, and that's pretty vital. We've interviewed a few people for those offices, but very vital offices.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about how long we've been doing this, that it was 4 years ago that we brought them in when they were candidates, and now it's time for them to file again if they're interested in running for reelection. And then, as I mentioned, we have our nonpartisan officers like our school board seats. So for the school board, half the seats will be up, including those representing Greer, Taylors, Berea, Greenville, Malden, and Southern Greenville County.
Okay. So I think that's basically an overview of what is on the ballot. So let's talk about timing now. For our listeners who are thinking about supporting a candidate, or maybe even running, which we also have episodes about that for, we'll link in the show notes. When do these elections actually happen? And when does the campaigning become official?
It is a clear timeline for next year. So the big election day for the general election to decide who represents you is on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026. But before that, there are other important steps for the candidates and for you as a voter, like critically important steps. So any of those partisan races, the governor, U.S. Senate, U.S. House, State House, County Council, we have the primaries. And the statewide primary election will be held on Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. If no candidate gets an outright majority in that primary, which is really common in a crowded field like we will have already in the gubernatorial race, there will be a primary runoff election that happens 2 weeks later on June 23rd, 2026. So just to kind of make sure it's crystal clear that in November, you see what party candidates are on the ballot. You'll see the Democratic candidate for governor. You'll see the Republican candidate for governor. Other parties, the Green Party, the Constitution Party, Libertarian, should they have someone. But how to decide which of those people get on there happens in June in the primary. And that's where you might see 5 Democrats, 6 Republicans. The parties choose who gets on there. So listen, the primary could not be more important because often this is when the decisions are actually made. In 2024, almost half of the seats within or that partially covered Greenville County had candidates from only one party file to run. This means that the elections were actually decided in the June primary.
So June is where the real competition begins to narrow the field. What about the all-important candidate filing period? When do potential candidates, like a listener who might be inspired, when do they have to officially declare their intent to run?
This is in the spring before that June primary, and the exact window is set by the State Election Commission, and it can be subject to change or by those local jurisdictions. It's usually, and I anticipate next year, will be noon March 16th through noon March 30th. And for 2026, all those candidates will need to file during that time. And I just want to add a little note here that if you're thinking about running, or if you're just really curious about it, people who are paying attention pay close attention to who files. And you can go on every day to the South Carolina Election Commission and look up who has filed here in Greenville County. A lot of times there are folks that are just kind of watching to decide if they want to run. There are people that are literally hanging out at the filing location at the local election commission to see who shows up by noon to decide whether they want to throw their hat in the ring. It's an important time. We pay close attention because we download the whole list of who filed. to invite them to be on this podcast so that you can meet them.
And we've met people who've come on who were those people that would wait until the last minute to see who's running. If they thought there was no better candidate than themselves, and they would put their name down. So that definitely happens. And basically, if you're an aspiring candidate, you need to be ready to commit well before summer.
Yes. And that's why we're seeing all the political activity right now. I mean, it takes time to get your volunteers together, raise the money, kind of talk with people to say, will you support me? I'm intending to run. What else do you know? What are the issues? And we've had episodes on that, which we can tag in the show notes.
Yes. And for our listeners who do want to be prepared, what do they need to be thinking about?
I would say mark your calendar, and I'm going to give you a few dates that I think are helpful reminders of the steps that you need to take. So I think President's Day, which in 2026 is February 16th, is a great time to double check your voter registration with the South Carolina Election Commission. There is a National Voter Registration Day in September, but something about President's Day is just connected with elections, and it's a great nudge for you to do that. Make sure it's current, especially if you've moved, and make sure if you haven't voted recently that you're still on the voter rolls. Another good reminder day to me is Tax Day, April 15th. That's a good time to see who is running in the June primary. Filing will have closed by then, and the candidates' campaigns should be gearing up so you can look to see who's on your ballot at the South Carolina Election Commission's website. Then you can look up these candidates if they have a candidate page or if they're on Facebook to talk about what their platform is. Now, remember that June primary are for the parties to pick their candidates, and you're going to have to choose which primary you wish to vote in. And it's usually the Democratic and Republican parties that hold those primaries. As of this episode posting, we do not register by party in South Carolina. So you have the opportunity to vote in either the Democratic or the Republican primary. You're going to want to look up both of those sample ballots so you can decide where to cast your vote. Another good reminder day is Memorial Day. We have early voting that opens 2 weeks before the election, and so right after Memorial Day, you can go and vote early if you like to, instead of on June 9th. And then the last day that you have to put on your calendar is June 23rd, which is when primary runoffs will take place. We've done an episode just on this, which again, we'll post in the show notes. It is like the overtime of this whole thing. So for you to not vote in the runoff is like you getting in your car and driving home right when your favorite football team goes to overtime. Makes no sense. So mark that on your calendar too. If only 2 candidates have filed for any given seat, there will not mathematically be a runoff. But when we get to 3 and certainly 4, it's highly, highly likely that a runoff will happen. And looking already at just our gubernatorial race or our U.S. Senate race, depending on which party you vote in, you'll very likely have the reason and chance to go back. So those are some specific dates you can pay attention to, things you can mark on your calendar. If you don't want to think about this every day, know that you can not pay attention until those dates come around. But if you're interested, there is a lot of conversation happening right now, especially in the gubernatorial race and especially in that U.S. Senate race. They are defining the political narrative for our state and drawing a lot of attention already. And those candidates' platforms on issues like taxes, infrastructure, education, they will directly affect your experience as a resident of Greenville County. So find out which congressional and state house district you live in, and just keep an eye on who's announcing their intention to run. And honestly, reach out to them because you are or will be their constituent, and they should want to hear from you about what you care about.
Well, that's all been great advice, Katie. Thank you for walking us through a preview of what we can expect in 2026 on the ballot. It is a lot to take in, but I'm glad you're all listening because it's really critical to be informed. And as we say with anything election related, share this with a friend, a neighbor, a family member, and check the show notes for a lot of links. You'll find links to the South Carolina Election Commission and the Greenville County Voter Registration Office in the show notes, but you'll also find links for other resources we mentioned, like the behind the scenes, if you're interested in running for office, what goes into a campaign, things like that. So check those out if you're interested. And please remember, your vote is your voice, and being informed is that first step. So thank you for being here. And Katie, thank you for doing this with us today.
Always my pleasure. As we always say, we do not care who you vote for. We just want you to vote.
Hi, Simple Civics Greenville County listeners, Nathaniel here. If you've made it this far, then we think you'll really love our newsletter. Sign up for bonus content, updates, and more right in your inbox. Look for the link in the description that says newsletter to sign up, or visit us at simplecivicsgreenvillecounty.org. Find the link in the menu that says newsletter and sign up there. We'll see you again next week.